The sound of the slap echoed through the grand mansion, sending Celina crashing to the floor, her cheek burning from Grace Langston's vicious strike. "You've ruined everything," Grace screamed, her fury burning through the room. But today, it was different. As Celina struggled to stand, Malcolm Langston, her employer and the cold billionaire she'd served for years, stepped forward, his voice barely a whisper but laced with shock. "I know the truth. Celina is my daughter." The words hit like a bomb, leaving Grace frozen in disbelief. Her stepdaughter, the girl she had tormented, humiliated and dehumanized, was the child they all thought had lost forever. The truth shattered their world in an instant. How will Grace react to this? And what will Celina do now that the secret has come out? How will Celina navigate this revelation, the truth about her own identity? And what will happen now that the woman who mistreated her for years is left speechless by the very daughter she never knew she had? Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow, I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. At 23, she was still just the maid, the girl who came from a poor neighborhood, whose family was long gone. When her mother died suddenly, Celina had been left with nothing but an old coat and a determination to survive. She started working for the Langstons as a part-time cleaner, but over time, Grace had insisted she be brought on full-time, first as a housekeeper, then eventually a maid. For years, Celina lived in the shadows of the Langston mansion, blending into the background like a ghost. She'd been taught her place early on by Grace. Grace had no interest in Celina's life, only ever reminding her of her duties, her role as a servant to a rich family. Celina had been nothing more than a tool to the Langstons, someone to cook, clean, and take care of the house, but never to be seen as part of the family. When Malcolm had hired her, Celina had barely spoken a word to him. She was too busy surviving, too focused on doing the job right, to notice much about the cold billionaire she served. But there was something about him, something that made her feel seen, even if only for a brief moment. The way his gaze lingered when he passed her in the halls. The moments when his tone softened, just slightly, when he thanked her for her work. It made her think that maybe, just maybe, there was more to the Langstons than their wealth and power. Grace, however, was a different story. She had no love for Celina. There was something about the girl, about the way she moved through the house, her quiet presence, that seemed to unsettle Grace in ways she couldn't explain. Celina's eyes were too familiar, her smile too kind. And when she worked, Grace had always felt that uncomfortable feeling, the feeling of being seen, of being exposed. Perhaps in Celina's quiet, humble way, she reminded Grace of a life she had tried to forget, the one where she had no power, no control, no place in a world full of privilege. And it was that power imbalance that Grace resented most. For years, Celina's identity had remained a mystery, even to herself. She had no knowledge of the woman she once was or the family she came from. Raised in a foster home after her mother's passing, she had grown up in the shadows, orphaned by circumstance, and forgotten by the world. What mattered was surviving. So when she got the job at the Langstons' mansion, it was a ticket out of the streets. But even as she moved into the sprawling mansion, there was a small part of her that felt out of place, lost in a world of luxury that had never been meant for someone like her. Malcolm Langston, the billionaire tech mogul, had lived with his own pain for years. His marriage to Grace had always been an odd transactional affair, built more on convenience and image than true love. For a man of his stature, an heir to carry on his empire was a necessity. But Grace couldn't conceive, a fact that slowly began to eat away at their relationship. After the devastating miscarriage years ago, they had both turned their hearts away from parenthood, and instead, they channeled their energy into the business. But even the success of Langston Technologies couldn't fill the void of silence in the mansion. The absence of a child to call their own, to nurture, to love, was a hollow space that neither of them could escape. But Malcolm's suspicion of Celina had always lingered. There was something in the way she looked at him, something that reminded him of his late mother, something in her eyes that made him wonder if fate had brought her into his home for a reason. For months, Malcolm had been quietly investigating her past, searching for answers that didn't make sense. He had arranged for a DNA test, not believing, but hoping, that it would somehow bring a solution. The discovery of a long-lost daughter, the child he thought he had lost forever. A miracle, but a miracle fraught with questions. Questions that he didn't have the courage to ask out loud until now. Grace, on the other hand, never even considered the possibility. When Celina was brought into the house, Grace saw a threat, not a daughter. She saw the young girl with her sweet, innocent eyes, her quiet strength, and her ability to somehow move through the mansion without ever truly being seen. Grace never suspected that Celina, the girl she treated so poorly, could actually be the key to her own redemption, the child that would change everything for both her and Malcolm. But the truth was about to be exposed in the most unforgiving way. What will Grace do when the truth is revealed, when the child she mistreated for years is finally uncovered? And how will Malcolm handle the consequences of the secret he's kept from his wife for so long? Malcolm's heart raced as he sat in his office, staring at the DNA test results. The weight of what he had discovered, the truth he had suspected but never dared to fully confront, was now undeniable. Celina, the young woman who had worked in his home for years, had been more than just an employee. She was his daughter, the daughter he and Grace had been searching for, the child they had given up on years ago. He had sent the test results to a lab in secret, feeling both hope and fear at the thought that his deepest wish might finally be granted. But now, as he sat alone in his study, anxiety gripped him. What would Grace think? Would she even believe it? The reality of the situation was overwhelming. He could finally be a father. He could finally fix the broken pieces of his life. But would Grace, his wife, accept this revelation? As he picked up the phone, ready to call Grace, his mind began to race. How could I tell her, he thought. How could I explain that the maid, the girl she's despised for years, is the daughter we've lost? Before he could make the call, his thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock on the door. "Come in," he said, his voice barely a whisper. Celina entered, her usual grace and poise still intact despite the heavy tension in the air. She held a stack of clean towels in her arms, but today, she didn't seem like the quiet maid. There was something different about her. Malcolm had known for a while now, there was always something more to Celina than met the eye. She looked at him cautiously, the same look she always had, the look of someone trying to stay invisible in a world that refused to acknowledge her. But now her gaze lingered, almost as though she sensed that the weight of the mansion was about to change forever. "Mr. Langston," she began, her voice soft but firm. "Is there anything else I can do for you today?" Malcolm swallowed hard, the moment heavy with unspoken truths. He stood, his hand shaking slightly as he placed the envelope with the test results on his desk. "Celina," he began slowly, "I need you to sit down." She hesitated but then did as he asked, taking a seat in front of the desk. Malcolm took a deep breath, the weight of his revelation crushing down on him. He looked at her for a moment, as though seeing her for the first time. Her dark eyes, the way she carried herself, her strength, her grace, it was all too familiar. But how had he missed it for so long? "Celina," he continued, "there's something I need to tell you. Something I've just discovered, and I can't keep it from you any longer." Before he could continue, the door burst open, and Grace stormed in. Her face was flushed with anger, her eyes wild as she marched toward the desk. Her gaze landed on Celina, and for a brief moment, the coldness in her expression faltered, just for an instant, before it became stone again. "Grace, I was just about to." "About to what, Malcolm?" Grace's voice cut through the room, sharp and accusing. "Explain this to her? After everything we've been through." Malcolm stood tall now, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. "Grace, I've known for a while. And I've had a DNA test done." Grace's eyes darted between them, her expression flickering from confusion to disbelief. She blinked several times, her lips parting in shock. What do you mean, a DNA test?" she stammered. "What test? What are you talking about?" Malcolm reached for the envelope, his hands trembling. He pulled out the results and handed them to Grace. The silence that followed was thick and suffocating. Grace took the paper, her hands shaking. She read the results in disbelief, her lips moving without sound, as if trying to make sense of what she was seeing. Slowly, as if the weight of the truth was too much to bear, she turned to Celina, who had remained silent through it all. "You," Grace whispered, her voice trembling. You're our daughter?" Celina's heart skipped a beat. Her breath caught in her throat. She had always suspected there was something more to her connection with the Langstons, but to hear it spoken aloud, to hear that she was the daughter they had lost, was like hearing a dream become a nightmare. Grace, in utter shock, stepped back, her hands trembling. The silence in the room was suffocating. Grace's eyes flickered between the test results in her hands and Celina, whose face was a mixture of disbelief and confusion. "No, this can't be right," Grace whispered, barely audible, her voice trembling as she read the results again. "She can't be," she trailed off, not even able to finish the sentence. Celina stood frozen, unsure of how to react. It was as if the ground beneath her had shifted, and she was suddenly caught in the middle of a storm. She had known, deep down, that something wasn't right. There had always been an eerie familiarity in the way Malcolm looked at her, the way he had always been protective in ways she hadn't fully understood. But a daughter? Grace looked up at Celina, the shock in her eyes transforming into something else, anger. "You lied to me," Grace spat, her voice rising in fury. "All this time, you knew who you were, and you let me treat you like this?" Her fists clenched, and Celina could feel the heat of her gaze. It was the same cold, dismissive anger she had always faced, but now it was even sharper, more personal. Malcolm stepped forward, trying to steady the situation. "Grace, stop," he said, his voice firm. "This is not the time." Celina didn't know, and it's not her fault. But Grace's anger was blinding. "No, Malcolm. She's been lying to us. You've been lying to me." Her voice cracked as she shouted. "How could you not tell me? After all these years, all this time, how could you keep this from me?" Celina flinched as Grace's words lashed at her like a whip. But before she could speak, Malcolm cut in again. "Grace, I didn't know until now. I didn't know who she was. I only found out recently, when I had the test done." His voice was calm, but it was clear the revelation was tearing at him as well. "You had the test done?" Grace's eyes widened, her voice filled with disbelief. You had the audacity to go behind my back and test her like some experiment?" Malcolm stepped back, his heart heavy with guilt. "No, Grace. I wasn't trying to hurt you. I had to know." His voice faltered as the weight of his decision settled on him. He had wanted this. He had wanted his daughter back. But now, with the truth exposed, it felt like the house of cards he had built over the years was collapsing in front of him. Celina felt like an outsider in her own life. She had always felt like a shadow in the mansion, but now, she was a piece in a game she didn't understand. She looked at Malcolm, her eyes filled with silent questions, but he couldn't answer them, not now. Not when the air was thick with accusation and betrayal. "You're not welcome here anymore," Grace suddenly snapped. Her eyes were cold, calculating. "I don't care who you are. You've ruined everything. You don't belong in this house. You don't belong in this family." The words hit Celina like a punch to the stomach. She could feel the walls closing in on her, the sting of rejection sharper than the physical pain she had endured in the past. Grace had never wanted her here, but now the truth made it even worse. Her existence, her very being, was an intrusion. But as Celina stepped back, her heart pounding, Malcolm's voice broke through. "Grace, stop. This isn't the way to handle this. Celina, she's our daughter. She deserves the chance to be a part of this family." Grace laughed bitterly, her lips curling into a sneer. "A daughter? A daughter you left for dead? You think after all this time, she'll just waltz in here and everything will be fine? We can't just pretend it's all fine, Malcolm. You can't just erase all the years of neglect and pain." For a moment, the room was silent. Grace's words hung in the air, and Celina felt the weight of her anger, and her own sense of betrayal. It was then that Celina realized, the Langstons weren't just people she worked for, they were people who had been hiding their own wounds, their own brokenness. She was part of their story, but their story was nothing like what she had imagined. The days following the revelation were tense. The once stately Langston mansion now felt more like a war zone, quiet, suffocating, full of unspoken words and broken trust. Celina had stayed in her room, out of sight, avoiding both Malcolm and Grace. She felt like a stranger in her own skin, the same skin that had carried her through years of work, of serving a family that had now revealed itself as fractured and far from perfect. Malcolm, on the other hand, was a man torn between his duty as a father and the guilt he felt toward Grace. The woman he had loved for so many years, his partner in both life and business, now seemed like a stranger, consumed by bitterness and anger. It was the third day after the truth came out when Malcolm decided to confront Grace. He could no longer stay silent, pretending that everything was fine. Their marriage had always been on the rocks, but now it seemed like the breaking point had arrived. He walked into the sitting room, where Grace was seated by the fire, her face pale and tired. The room was dark, despite the midday sun outside. The air felt cold. "Grace, we need to talk," he said softly, his tone firm but cautious. Grace didn't look up. "I don't want to talk, Malcolm." Her voice was flat, devoid of emotion. "Grace, this isn't just about you and me anymore," he said, his voice rising slightly. "This is about Celina. She's our daughter, our flesh and blood. You need to understand that." Grace stood up sharply, her chair scraping against the floor. She turned to face him, her eyes narrowing with anger. "Our daughter," she spat. "The girl who's been under our roof all these years, pretending to be a maid? A lie. She's a stranger to me. And I'm supposed to accept her as my daughter? Just like that." Malcolm's chest tightened. He had hoped that, over time, Grace would come to understand the significance of this discovery, but he knew it wasn't going to be easy. "I know this is hard, Grace. I know it's a lot to process, but we can't just throw this away. We've lost so much already, and now we have the chance to heal." But Grace shook her head, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "Heal? Malcolm, you're the one who's been hiding the truth from me for years. What else have you been hiding? What other lies have you been feeding me?" Her words hit him like a slap. Grace was right. He had been hiding the truth, not just about Celina, but about so many things. He had tried to protect their family, their image, but in doing so, he had lost sight of what truly mattered. Just then, Celina entered the room, her eyes still red from days of crying and confusion. "I didn't ask for this," she said, her voice shaky but firm. She looked directly at Grace. "I didn't ask to be here, and I sure as hell didn't ask for any of this mess. But I'm tired of being treated like I don't matter. You've never cared about me, Grace. You've never once seen me as a human being, just a servant." Grace's face reddened with fury. "You don't understand. You have no idea what it's been like for me. I've done everything, sacrificed everything, and yet I still ended up with nothing. The one thing I wanted, and now you come in and take it all away." "What do you mean?" Celina asked, her heart racing. She had always wondered what had made Grace so bitter, so cold. "What did you lose? You had everything. The perfect house, the perfect life. What else did you want?" Grace's face twisted in frustration, then suddenly she froze. "You think this is about you, don't you? About me losing you? No, Celina. This is about my child, the one I lost, my daughter. The one I've been searching for, the one I couldn't have, the one who died." The words were like a bomb dropped in the middle of the room. The air seemed to evaporate as Celina stood frozen, stunned by the confession. Grace's true pain had been hidden beneath layers of bitterness and anger, and now it was out in the open. Celina's heart ached for the woman who had fought so hard for a child, only to be consumed by the lie of her own loss. But there was more to the story. And as Grace's words lingered in the air, Malcolm's face changed. He had known, but he hadn't known everything. He had always suspected something about Celina, but this was more than he could have ever imagined. The truth about Celina's mother, about their family's past, was more complicated than he had realized. "I didn't want to tell you this, Grace," Malcolm said quietly, his voice trembling with regret. "But I knew. The woman you lost, she's Celina's mother. Your daughter didn't die, Grace. She left. And Celina's the child you've been searching for all these years." Grace's eyes widened in disbelief. She staggered back, as if the weight of the truth had physically struck her. For the first time, she seemed small, broken. With the truth now laid bare, will Celina be able to find her place in this family, or will Grace's unresolved grief and betrayal tear them apart forever? The mansion that once felt like a symbol of wealth and success now felt like a prison. The grand halls, filled with opulent furniture and expensive decor, seemed to close in around Celina as she sat in the small, dimly lit kitchen, her hands trembling. She couldn't believe what had just happened, what Grace had said, what Malcolm had revealed. Her entire life had been a lie. For the first time, she felt like she was truly alone. Her entire existence had been spent serving the Langstons, doing everything she could to make their lives easier, never once questioning the place she occupied. But now, the truth was out. Grace wasn't just her stepmother, she was the one who had pushed her away. Celina's heart ached. She had always wondered why Grace had treated her with such coldness, such hostility, but now she understood. It wasn't because Celina was just a maid. Grace's bitterness came from the loss of her own child, the one she had been searching for all these years. And now the daughter she had spent so long mourning was right there in front of her, but Celina didn't know if there was room for her in Grace's heart. Malcolm's face haunted her. The way he had looked at her, the way he had finally acknowledged her as his daughter, felt empty now. He had been the one to hide the truth from both of them. Celina had never known who she truly was, never known the truth about her past. How could he have kept that from her? How could he have allowed Grace's cruelty to continue without revealing the truth? A knock on the door broke her thoughts. She hesitated before answering, feeling a strange lump rise in her throat. When she opened the door, it was Malcolm, standing in the doorway, his face weary but determined. "Can we talk?" he asked softly. Celina didn't answer right away. She stood there for a moment, staring at him. His eyes, once filled with hope and warmth, now looked tired, as if he had aged years in a matter of days. "I don't know what to say to you, Malcolm," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You've ruined everything." Malcolm stepped forward, his expression pained. "I know, Celina. I know. And I'm sorry. I should have told you the truth sooner. I should have told both of you." Celina shook her head, stepping back. "You should have. But instead, you let me live in the shadows. You let Grace treat me like a ghost in this house. You let her beat me down day after day while you did nothing." Malcolm's face hardened. "I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to fix this. I thought I was protecting you, protecting Grace, but I was wrong." The words felt hollow. What was the point of all of this now? After years of being treated like an invisible part of their life, did Malcolm even have the right to claim her as his daughter? A cold silence hung between them. The distance that had always existed between them, between Celina and the Langstons, felt like an insurmountable chasm now. Celina couldn't bring herself to trust him again, not after everything that had been hidden. She turned her back to him, her hands shaking as she walked toward the window. The moonlight was faint against the dark sky, but the shadows in her heart felt overwhelming. She had always wondered if she was missing something, if there was something about her life she didn't understand. And now that the truth was exposed, nothing made sense. Grace's voice broke the silence. She stood in the doorway, her eyes bloodshot from crying, but her expression was hard. She had been waiting for the moment to face Celina again, and now, it seemed as though the weight of her own guilt and grief was too much to bear. "I've done things I can't undo, Celina," Grace said softly. "I've treated you like you were nothing when you were everything. I pushed you away because I couldn't bear the thought of losing what I never had." Celina turned to face Grace, the woman who had never once shown her affection. "You pushed me away because I wasn't the daughter you wanted," she said, her voice sharp with pain. "You used me to fill the hole in your heart, but you never let me in. You always kept me at a distance. I was never enough for you." Grace stepped forward, her voice trembling. "I didn't want to hurt you, Celina. I didn't know how to fix what was broken inside me. But now—" Grace's voice broke as she approached Celina. There was no anger left in her, only regret. "I never saw you. I never realized who you really were. I'm sorry. I didn't know how much I had lost until now." Celina looked at Grace, the woman who had been her stepmother, the woman who had hurt her for so long. Could she forgive her? Could she accept this apology after everything? The days that followed the confrontation between Celina, Grace, and Malcolm felt like an eternity. Celina had locked herself away in her room, the mansion's silence pressing down on her as she tried to make sense of everything. The confusion, the betrayal, the overwhelming emotions that crashed over her, nothing felt real. One minute she was the maid invisible to the world, and the next, she was being told she was the lost daughter of the Langstons, the family she had served so loyally for years. But being told something and believing it were two different things. That night, Celina couldn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling, her mind swirling with thoughts. She tried to ignore the doubts, the voice inside her head telling her she didn't belong. The Langstons, especially Grace, had always seen her as less than a servant, an obstacle in their perfect life. But now, the truth was undeniable. Celina was their daughter, and for the first time, she was being given the chance to be something more. But it came at a cost. The past, the years of mistreatment, the pain, the isolation. Could she ever truly be a part of this family? Was there even room for her in this world of wealth and power? The weight of the decision gnawed at her. Could she forgive Grace and Malcolm? The following day, Celina ventured out to the garden, seeking a moment of peace. The flowers in the mansion's expansive garden were in full bloom, but they didn't seem to bring her the same comfort they used to. It all felt empty now, like the mansion was just a grand stage and she was an extra in a scene she never understood. But as she walked through the garden, a thought suddenly struck her. She wasn't just a maid anymore. She had a right to be seen, to be loved, to exist without fear of being pushed aside. As she sat on a bench in the garden, Malcolm came to find her. She could see him from a distance, his usual business suit now looking out of place in the quiet, peaceful atmosphere of the garden. He approached her cautiously, like a man who wasn't sure how to approach his own daughter. "Celina," he said softly, his voice hesitant. "I know things are difficult right now. I just wanted to check on you." Celina looked at him, her emotions still raw. "I'm fine," she lied, though her voice betrayed her. "I just need some space, Malcolm." Malcolm sat beside her, his eyes filled with regret. "I don't know how to fix this," he admitted. "I've spent so many years believing in things that weren't true, and now I have to rebuild everything. But I want to rebuild it with you, Celina. I want you in my life. You're my daughter, and nothing will change that." Celina's chest tightened. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that there was a future for them as a family, but there were too many wounds, too much history between them. "You can't just expect me to forget everything, Malcolm," she whispered, looking away. "You treated me like I was nothing, like I didn't matter. Grace treated me like I wasn't even human. And now you're asking me to just forgive it all." Malcolm's face tightened with pain, but he nodded. I know. And I'm sorry. I can't take back the years you've lost, but I can promise you, Celina, I'll spend the rest of my life making it right. Not for me. Not for Grace. But for you. You deserve that." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The garden felt oddly quiet, as though the world outside was holding its breath. Celina looked at her father, this man she had longed for her entire life, and for the first time, she saw something in him, genuine remorse. It was the first real moment of honesty between them. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Malcolm," Celina said, her voice wavering with emotion. "But I'm willing to try. I want to understand who I am, who you both are. But I can't keep pretending I don't have a choice in this anymore." Malcolm placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice thick with emotion. "I understand. But just know, Celina, that I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. And neither are you." Celina took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his words. For the first time in years, she felt like there was a chance for something better, something real. But it wouldn't be easy. It had been weeks since Celina had begun to consider forgiveness, to think about a future with the Langstons. But nothing prepared her for the storm that was about to hit. The mansion, once filled with the sounds of laughter and warmth, now felt like a graveyard of broken dreams. Celina still stayed in her room most days, trying to make sense of everything, but the tension between her and Grace, between her and Malcolm, was palpable. She wasn't sure if they could truly heal. The wounds ran too deep. It was the morning of a big event, the Langstons' annual charity gala. Grace had insisted that Celina be involved in the preparations, despite their differences. She had no idea why, but Celina couldn't help but feel an odd sense of purpose. Maybe Grace was finally ready to see her as more than just a servant. But when Celina entered the ballroom that day, the feeling of unease that had been gnawing at her turned to dread. Grace was standing at the center of the room, her back straight and rigid as she spoke to the guests, perfectly poised. She turned to Celina as soon as she entered, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. "Celina," Grace said coldly, her voice laced with tension. "I need you to take care of the drinks. The champagne must be served precisely." Her tone was clipped, almost dismissive. Celina nodded, swallowing the bile that rose in her throat. She had tried to push aside the pain Grace had caused her, but now it came rushing back. It wasn't just the slaps, the insults. It was the constant reminder that she was never good enough. She would never be good enough for Grace. But today, something in Celina shifted. She wasn't the same silent servant she had been before. She had a voice now. As she began arranging the champagne glasses, Malcolm entered the room. His gaze immediately landed on her. He had been keeping his distance lately, trying to give Grace and Celina space, but something in his eyes told her this was no ordinary moment. He walked over to Celina and with a quiet nod, placed a small velvet box on the table in front of her. "Celina," he said softly, his voice low but filled with emotion, "I know this isn't easy, but I wanted to give you something to show you that you matter to me. You always have." Grace, watching from a distance, took a step forward, her eyes flashing with anger. "What is this, Malcolm?" she demanded. "I thought we agreed. We agreed that this wasn't about Celina." Malcolm's gaze was unwavering as he turned to Grace. His voice was firm. "No, Grace. I'm not letting this go. Celina is my daughter. I can't pretend anymore. I can't keep ignoring the truth, not when it's staring me in the face. I've waited too long for this moment. I'm done hiding." Celina's heart pounded in her chest. The truth was finally out, and it felt like the walls had come crashing down. Grace's face twisted in fury. She stormed forward, the air thick with hatred and disbelief. "You've been hiding this from me for years," she shouted. "You've been lying to me, Malcolm. All these years, and now you expect me to just accept her as part of this family." The room grew silent. The guests at the gala, sensing the tension, began to murmur, unsure of what was happening. But then, Grace's voice dropped. Her tone turned venomous. "She's just a maid, Malcolm. She's not a Langston. She doesn't belong here. You can't just change the rules because it suits you now." Celina's chest tightened. "I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask to be part of this family," she said quietly, her voice cutting through the tension. "But I'm not going to stand here and let you treat me like nothing anymore. I'm not your servant. I'm not your punching bag. And I'm certainly not going to pretend that everything is okay when it's not." Grace recoiled as if struck, her face flushing with shame. For the first time in years, Celina felt empowered, like she had the right to speak her truth. But it wasn't just about the Langstons. It was about her own journey, her struggle to find herself, to find her worth in a world that had constantly reminded her she was less than. And in that moment, as Celina stood tall in front of Grace and Malcolm, she knew she had a choice. She didn't have to remain in this mansion, bound by the chains of an identity they had placed on her. She was more than what they thought of her. Now that Celina has found her voice, will she leave the Langstons behind, or will she find a way to rebuild the shattered family she never asked for? The Langston mansion was quieter now, almost peaceful in its silence. Gone were the chaotic arguments, the cold stares, the heaviness that had hung in the air for weeks. The tension had broken, but it had left a trail of change in its wake. The walls that had once separated them, Celina, Grace, and Malcolm, had begun to crack. Now, there was space for understanding, for growth. Celina stood by the window, staring out at the expansive garden that seemed to stretch forever beyond the mansion. The morning sun glinted off the leaves, casting a warm golden glow across the yard. For the first time in years, Celina felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel before: hope. The events of the past few days had been life-altering. There was no denying the pain, the betrayals, the hidden truths that had surfaced. But in that moment, she understood one thing: the past was gone, and now it was up to them to rebuild. To rewrite the future. As she stood there, lost in her thoughts, Malcolm entered the room. He was dressed casually for the first time in a long while, his suit jacket hanging loosely over his arm. He looked at her for a moment, as if taking in the change in her. "Celina," he said softly, his voice more vulnerable than it had ever been. "I know I've let you down. I've let both of you down. But I'm ready to make things right. I don't have all the answers, but I'm willing to try. For you. For our family." Celina turned to face him, her heart heavy but not burdened. "I don't know if I can forgive you yet, Malcolm," she admitted, her voice soft but firm. "But I'm willing to try too. Maybe that's all we can do for now, try." A slow smile spread across Malcolm's face, a smile of relief and understanding. He stepped forward and for the first time in years, he reached out and gently took her hand. "That's all I ask," he said quietly, squeezing her hand in a simple gesture of support. But the peace they were beginning to build didn't stop with just them. Grace, who had spent so long hiding behind her anger, was standing in the doorway, watching the two of them. Her face was less rigid, her expression less cold than it had been before. There were still shadows in her eyes, but they seemed softer now, as though the years of resentment and bitterness had begun to fade. She approached them cautiously, her movements unsure. "Celina," she said, her voice wavering for the first time, I can't undo the damage I've done. I can't fix the hurt I've caused. But I want to try too. I want to be your mother." Celina looked at her, feeling a mix of emotions swirl inside her, anger, sadness, but also something deeper. Something like forgiveness. It wasn't an easy road, but it was a road she was now willing to walk down. "I don't know if I can call you Mom yet," Celina said softly, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "But I'll try, Grace. I'll try." The three of them stood there, in the quiet peace of the mansion, the weight of everything that had been said and done hanging in the air. But for the first time, there was no tension. No walls. Just a fragile understanding, a shared hope that, despite everything, they could build something real. Days passed, and the Langston family began to take small but significant steps toward healing. The mansion, once a symbol of brokenness, slowly began to feel like a home again. Celina and Malcolm had their first real conversation as father and daughter. It was awkward at first, filled with 1,000 unsaid words, but it was real. Grace, too, began to open up to Celina, admitting her own faults and regrets. But the true turning point came when Celina made a decision that would change everything. She went to the front door, where her old suitcase was sitting. She hadn't touched it in years, but it had always been a reminder of the life she had left behind. With a deep breath, she picked it up and carried it into the living room. She looked at Malcolm and Grace, who watched her with anticipation, fear, and hope in their eyes. "I'm not leaving," Celina said, her voice strong, her gaze unwavering. "But I'm doing this for myself, not for you. I need to create my own future. And I need you to respect that." Malcolm and Grace exchanged a look, and for the first time, they both nodded. They understood. This was Celina's journey, and they could only walk alongside her as she chose to embrace her own path. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.